So, welcome to another great episode of the Life Optimized podcast. I am Dr. Neil Paulvin, your host for today. And this is the podcast where you learn how to optimize your life, health, and business. And today we have a really great guest, Wade Lightheart, who has a very interesting pathway to coming to us today. He was a national natural bodybuilding champion ×3. He's now one advisor to the Cancer Society, and he's also a member and head of BioOptimizers, one of my favorite supplement companies. And they have a book coming out in the end of September called The Nutrition Bible, which I'm really excited to get into. I heard some of the details of what it's about, and it's a different slant on diet that I've not seen in any other book that's out there. But first, welcome, Wade. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here, and hopefully we can add some value to your listeners.
I have a feeling that's not going to be a problem. So first you started off in bodybuilding, and you're on the natural side, which I have a couple of friends and colleagues who've done it, and it's definitely a different vibe and energy than the some of the other competitions. So how did that evolve, and did that lead to anything else that you went into afterwards?
Sure. I think bodybuilding, to give the devil its due, they are the original biohackers. And why I say that, if you look at what bodybuilders are trying to achieve, they're trying to overcome millions of years of evolutionary tendencies. And that is, one, to build an excess amount of muscle, and two, to build suboptimal levels of body fat relative to those are correlating to survival mechanisms. So they're trying to overcome those genetic traits, because there just wasn't enough food going around evolutionary wise, and too much muscle was not necessarily conducive to long-term success. And so bodybuilders develop, the use of first training various machines and exercises equipment. And then in order to increase the muscle mass past, normal levels, they had to, go to specialized diets and dietary strategies. And then eventually that went into nutritional supplementation. If you go back to, say, Vince Gironda and the Wild Physique days, and then came the, cornucopia of pharmaceuticals and things like that, now permeates the sport today. But many of the discoveries that were, pioneered by bodybuilders are now leveraged by biohackers, as well as the anti-aging field. And the radical experimentation of bodybuilders, and obviously it's a radical sport, has given rise to what I think is where we are in biohacking today.
Yeah, they're definitely the original biohackers. I've heard, the amount of stuff legal and sometimes illegal that they were kind of dabbling, and they were definitely the experiment of one on themselves. But they know it down to the itty bitty diet. They know from the beginning of their training to the day before the competition exactly what they need to do. And they were the first people, or one of the first types of groups, that looked at that data as much as they could even 20 years ago, like Schwarzenegger, and all the way up to where we are now, which is, again, a different total vibe. So it's kind of, again, like that, they are the originators. So when did you stop doing the bodybuilding?
Well, I got into bodybuilding as a teenager. What happened is my sister was diagnosed with cancer, and she was dying. Over the course of 4 years, we were moved to a rural area, and she was getting sick on the way home from the hospital from all the chemotherapy and radiation. I remember thinking to myself, God, shouldn't if you're trying to be healthy or overcome an illness, shouldn't you try and move towards better health? She gave me a bodybuilding magazine with Muscle and Fitness. I remember it had Troy Zuclato on the cover, and he won Mr. California and had all that kind of Arnold-esque kind of marketing behind him. And he looked vital and strong. And so in my naive 15-year-old self, I thought, if I build muscles and look like that, two things are going to happen. One, I'll be healthy. And two, maybe I'll get the girls that are on the cover as well. So I started lifting and training, and went to university, studied exercise physiology. I read Evolution of a Bodybuilder, or Education of a Bodybuilder, by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Who was dominating the movie scenario. And it looked like a great idea. Build muscles, get girls, be in the movies, live in California, train at Gold's Gym. I thought, hey, that seems better than the frozen winter here with no prospects of anything and nowhere, Canada. So I got onto that, and after I went to university for 4 years, I was really disappointed. And why I was disappointed is there was a collection of information, or here's how your physiological system works. Here's how your biological mechanisms or your biochemistry works. But there was very little real world application for what it was going on. I had been engaged in a particular routine of high intensity training that had lowered my heart rate by about 10 beats per minute. And this is back in 1990s, early 1990s. And I went to all my exercise physiology professors and I asked them, here's what I've been doing for the last year. My resting heart rate has dropped this amount. What's the reason for that? Nobody could answer the question. Like, all of my professors at university couldn't answer this simple question. And I was like, what do these guys know? And so I began on a journey of finding mentors who could help me achieve my physique goals, and concordantly, fell into the nutrition industry as well as a point of interest, working in stores and being a sales rep eventually. And then I worked in gyms. Then I ended up starting my own nutrition store while I was personal training. So I got to learn that not only was there very different dietary strategies and supplement strategies, but those applied to a whole different applications. How you trained a 70-year-old hairdresser versus a 22-year-old bodybuilder, with very different goals and outcomes and very different genetics and very different metabolic components, was radically different. And then I kind of understood why you needed to be able to build a set of formulas or a set of structures that you could apply as a framework to allow people to produce the result they want. And I became known as one of the who's who trainers in Vancouver, Canada. And at the same time, my business partner in Bioptimizers, Matt Gallant, he also had moved out. We had become friends. We had met at a bodybuilding contest years before. We became friends. And he was training people in Vancouver. I helped him come out there. And what was interesting is Matt was a ketogenic guy. I'm a plant-based guy. And most of my clients are neither plant-based or ketogenic. And so we got into a lot of arguments about what the best strategy was. And you can enter into any forum on the internet today and see all those arguments still going on, 20 plus years later from where we were, and they were probably happening 20 years before we started. And the reality is there's a variety of different applications, opportunities, and liabilities within any dietary strategy and with any nutritional strategy. And when you look at your genetics, what your outcome goal is, and what is your sustainable lifestyle, very few people are talking about those three components and how you can apply them to virtually any dietary strategy to create what we call the optimal outcome. And so after 20 years of, I would say, really spirited discussions between Matt and I, we were able to craft a variety of principles that anybody could apply using technology today to optimize for whatever their goal is, whatever their lifestyle is, and as well as what their genetics are.
So list those three factors for the listeners one more time, because some of those are not what you hear all the time regarding getting their outcome that they want. So it's genetics.
Yes. Genetics, goals, and lifestyle. So let me give you a quick breakdown of how those might flesh out. And I'll give you a personal example. Last year, at 50 years old, I decided I was going to do a bodybuilding contest. I hadn't done a bodybuilding contest in, 15 years or something like that. And I said, hey, I'm going to be 50. I want to just come back and see what I can do as a natural bodybuilder and come back. Well, I came back, won a competition, went back to the world championships again at 50 years old, which was pretty remarkable. But I switched gears immediately after that contest and took up running, because bodybuilders aren't known for running, applied a different set of strategies. Obviously, my genetics didn't change, and ran my first marathon 6 months later. So those two different outcomes required a change in training strategy, dietary strategy, lifestyle strategy, even though my genetics didn't change inside of that. So my goal changed, and then I had to correlate what lifestyle components I needed to put in and then apply to my genetics. And, your body goals tend to change over time. And I'll give you another example. We have what we call the biological optimization triangle and it's aesthetics, performance, and health. Most people get attracted into the fitness and nutrition industry for an aesthetic goal. They want to look better, they want to lose weight, they want to gain some muscle, whatever that happens to be. It's usually a cosmetic interest. As a person matures through time and you get into your career or your working life, you don't have time to be, looking good at the beach all the time. You're usually leaning more towards, performance, executives, performers, people in, high intensity education pursuits, or if they are managing a very busy lifestyle with a family, et cetera, things like that. Those are going to be factors that are involved. And then the final piece of the equation is, what are the genetics that you're looking at? And when you're looking for a long-term solution, health, the things that your diet or exercise program doesn't address relative to your individual genetics are the things that, create suboptimal health or poor health outcomes over time. And I can give you some specific examples personally if you want to dive into that.
Definitely go into that in 1 second, but I want to you brought up genetics. So the genetics part, is that something, were we talking doing a 23andMe? Are we doing a full DNA? Are these basic things that anybody can kind of look into? When you say genetics, with our technology now, that can mean so many different things. Where specifically do people need to look for to get that physique or whatever the desired goal may be?
Well, great question. So there's a lot of different genetic programs that are available right now that you can get, and they're varying in how comprehensive they might be. And I think 23andMe is a start, but I think there's some other tests that you can go and there's tests that are $200, tests that are $500, tests that are a couple of $1,000s. I've done most of them, and some of them, how they're pre-developed for outcomes. For example, you can take True Diagnostics, which is looking at maybe, say, longevity perspectives. The DNA company is creating one that is looking at, particular health risks that you may engage in over time. So if let's say you're doing stem cells or, V cells or exosomes or something like that, you can do True Diagnostics and actually see the impact from a longevity perspective relative to their algorithms that they've developed on genetics. So there's the test, and then there's the subset of algorithms that you're applying to look at your outcomes. And then if you take, say like, you go to a company like the DNA company, I'll give you an example. And I'm not, advocating for any particular brand, but you can kind of study around based on your outcome. So looking at a longevity perspective for myself, because that's something, we have a goal of living healthily to 100 and beyond. Inside that situation, I look at my genetics and I have three interesting suboptimal genetic pieces. One is I have a double gene that's poor for cardiovascular outcomes. Number two, I have a suboptimal gene for blood sugar management. And number three, I have a gene particularly that doesn't create food satiety easily. Okay, so let's take those three things from a longevity perspective, and I'll give you a breakdown of how I've applied it and how someone else could do the same thing if they have this information. So wanting to live as healthy as possible, as long as possible, if I was to follow a traditional bodybuilding diet, which has, a high amount of animal protein, moderate level of really clean carbohydrates, and very low body fat or low fat intake, most coming from, inadvertent animal fats, my blood sugar stability is going to be excellent. However, when I get around 70 or 80 years old, the likelihood that I have a cardiovascular incident, that's a heart attack or a stroke, goes up exponentially based on that profile. The other thing is, that diet is particularly good from a satiety factor, so I could probably manage my blood sugar because I'm not going to get that hungry. So I was like, okay, well, if you look at cardiovascular risk for people on a plant-based diet, it's excellent outcomes. The challenge is it's suboptimal for blood sugar regulation. Okay. And there's, from a satiety perspective, you're not getting a lot of protein. And protein is one of the most satisfying foods that you can eat. That's why bodybuilders have a high protein diet and a calorie deficit to lose all that body fat, because they're not as hungry as someone else. Now, if I go to a straight plant-based diet without addressing those issues, I'm going to eat too much plant-based foods. I'm probably going to, be really hard to maintain a lifestyle where I'm going to, start buying, really refined foods to kind of make up this calorie, because I don't have that delay switch on my, how much food I consume. So I'm not going to regulate that very well. So what I did is I took a bodybuilding mentality. I increased my protein intake, and I concentrated on jacking up my fiber, because, you can't get, at 200 pounds, I can't get 200 grams of protein or 250 grams of protein on a plant-based diet like most, bodybuilders would do if they were eating a meat eating book. But I can up my fiber intake to ridiculous levels, which increases my satiety, helps regulate my blood sugar, and I have optimized my digestion, so I convert all the protein I'm eating into the amino acids that recreates my recovery, and I'm supplementing with an essential fatty acid that's based from an algae source, and I've covered all my bases. I've reduced my cardiovascular risk, I've addressed my suboptimal satiety components so that I can stay on the diet easily, and I've optimized my blood sugar to the point that when you take a HOMO-IR test, it looks like I got, I'm on a ketogenic diet or something like that. But, that was a bit of finagling. So Matt has a completely different strategy as a ketogenic person, and he applies the same frameworks to optimize for his outcomes.
What's great about what Wade is saying is he's doing two different really great things. He's doing is combining it into one big idea. He knows his data and he knows what his goals are. With weight loss or building muscle or living to 100, all the things that he mentioned, you need to know your data. If you're just guessing what your genetics are or what your labs are, the chance of you getting there would be almost sheer luck. Second, he know what his goals are, and he developed a plan. He's for himself. Would that plan work for me? I'm not plant-based. It probably would not be my program, but it doesn't matter. So what is great, what he's discussing and what goes into the book, and we're talking about in a little bit, is you want a program that works for you. If you talk with an expert or a trainer and they have the same cookie cutter program that for you and your friend and Joe Bob down the street, that's a really big kind of red flag, because especially in all these major goals, none of us are going to get there the same way. So it's really cool how he's implementing all these different things into one. And then it's also great that he has part of a big supplement company, so you can make these things in the lab and figure out what works best. And I've met Matt once or twice at conferences and things, and you guys, are kind of like little kids in the lab sometimes trying to get all this stuff together. So we went from that to the supplement company. So what philosophies did you maintain from the weightlifting part of your life to then, and what things did you kind of put away? What are you now concentrating on more in terms of your lifestyle, and then in terms of what you want biooptimizers, what they've already been? Everybody talks about the magnesium. I'll admit I love the Natopia product, I'm going to get into hopefully in a little bit. So what went from A to B, and what kind of changed when you're not trying to put on as much mass as possible?
Yeah, great question. Well, it's interesting we have a biological engineering lab in Bosnia. We got about 30 PhDs and master students doing literally around-the-clock experiments in order to kind of prove out what happens. And, a lot of people are talking about genetics, and I think that's provided a great, insight into what's right for the individual. And we have about 22,000 genes or something like that, for the human genome. But we've got literally millions when you're talking about the genetic variants within your microbiome. So the first thing that biooptimizers recognized, it was that we needed to be able to optimize a person's digestive system, because the thing with all diets is all diets work for a while and then they don't. And that's supported by the evidence that 97% of people who begin a diet will actually end gaining all the weight back. They don't hit their goals. And, very few people are living healthily, in their 80s, 90s, and 100s. It's almost a crapshoot. And I think that we can legitimately leverage science to live healthily to 100. In other words, what we call the biospan, that you're relatively functional in your 80s, 90s, and 100s, instead of just having the odd outlier out there. And so microbiome is the diversity within your bacteria culture. So you have enzymes that break down the first part of your food. You have hydrochloric acid, which is involved in disinfecting from all the pathogens, as well as changing the pH to optimize your digestion. And then the third piece is the various types of bacteria strains in which is called your microbiome. And these little organisms live symbiotically in the body, and they convert all of your food into the building blocks and energy units. So the only thing that does any work in your body is actually enzymes, and which are we call bioworkers, which activate over 25,000 or accelerate over 25,000 different chemical processes in their body, and bacteria, which convert literally everything we eat. And so this relationship is really critical to optimizing your health and being able to deliver the nutrients to your body. And the variance between individuals is significant. So if you put someone on a carnivore diet for 3 months, or actually even 3 weeks, versus someone that's on a plant-based diet, their microbiome is going to radically be different. And therefore, you need to optimize both their digestive capacity as well as what they're delivering to their body from a nutrient. So you're not what you eat, you're what you digest, absorb, and utilize. That has both a biological component, your genetic component, and a biodiversity or your microbiome component. And so when you understand that, then you can really you can be successful on almost any diet, regardless of your genetics. You just have to be able to supplement around it or take the right bacteria cultures or right digestive aids, because maybe that fits your lifestyle. And in order to determine that, we created a nutritional pyramid of decisions that you have to factor in order to be successful long term.
And then for most people, I'm sure they're doing some type of stool test out there. There's numerous ones out there that give the information that Wade is talking about. I mean, the things that we want to look at is diversity of the microbiome. They're specific. I mean, Wade mentioned insulin at the beginning. We'll look at like certain microbiome components like Akkermansia and things like that. And then also butyrate and things like all those different components are going to play into what Wade is talking about. So you get the data, then they have the information in terms of these algorithms or pyramids that are going to get you that next step. Data first, and then you can embark on your goal. And then, so once people know that data, you're saying that we can use that data for whatever diet they specifically feel good. Because like I said, I am never going to, I can do keto. I cannot do a plant-based diet. So I could have a different plan than you can and hopefully get to the same goal of putting on mass or running a marathon or, I mean, if you can make me live to 100, then you have a whole new niche there. But so that's what you guys are with the book and the products you have coming out can hopefully kind of coexist all together.
Exactly. So, we created this book. It's literally a Bible. Like, this is a huge reference. And we show how to successfully navigate all the different outcomes, all the different major dietary strategies, and how to look at your individual challenges and opportunities. So, of course, someone who has great genetics for cardiovascular health, their upper end ceiling might be much better from an athletic perspective than, like cycling or swimming or running. And they probably enjoy those sports a lot better than maybe weightlifting. And some people who's very mesomorphic and has, optimal mTOR response, like a Ronnie Coleman type, they're born to build muscle. They just don't have the limitations that maybe a hardcore ectomorph might have. So there are going to be certain genetic limitations and biases, but I think virtually anybody can look good and feel good and operate their best on whatever diet fits their lifestyle with this Bible. And I think it gives you a set of questions to take to your professionals. And we are big believers in getting the appropriate professional to give you their specific expertise to help you make better choices and to make the little tweaks in your diet or in your exercise routine or in your overall lifestyle approach that allows you to live your best life.
And I mean, I deal with it all the time in the office. Are there 2 or 3 factors that people who want to, again, let's just say lose weight or build muscle, kind of have to automatically buy into no matter what their diet du jour is? Is it again, obviously it's caloric restriction. It's to a certain extent. It's obviously exercise. There are certain things that people, no matter where they're going, have to buy into, because I have patients come to me and say, I don't care. I just want to lose 20 pounds. I don't want to go to the gym. I'm like, I just raise my hand up and say, I don't know what to do with this. But what do people who are motivated to do it, what are 2 or 3 things that they need to kind of start with and to move forward?
Great question. So the research has shown a couple of key components. If you're going to lose body fat over time and maintain it off, the best strategy is to add resistance training into your diet so that you can keep your metabolism revved and address loss of muscle on calorie restriction. The next thing that people need to look at is, if you're trying to lose weight, it's a calories in, calories out model. You have to create a sustainable calorie deficit over time, and periodic strategic breaks within that diet that is going to allow you to maintain your metabolism. And then the third piece to that is, once they achieve their optimal goal, how to reverse diet out of that. And this is your strategy after you reach your goal is where people screw up the most. It's one thing to lose 20 pounds. The second piece is to keep it off, because you're going to default back to maybe your lifestyle parameters, or what happens in a lot of people is they lose so much muscle, or their metabolism slows so much that even in a small calorie surplus, they start gaining weight after and freaking out and think, oh, I can't do it, or my hormones are off, or all these other things. And it's because they just didn't have the right strategy post their desirable weight goal. That's just one example.
So love all 3. So when there's so much different data out there now in terms of resistance training, are you encouraging, can it be a 15-minute high intensity workout? Does it have to be 30 minutes doing a certain amount of sets, or is it obviously variable on the person? Because I get that question all the time.
Yeah, there's two components. It's going to whether you are in the building or active stage, like where you're trying to build muscle, or you're trying to maintain muscle, or you're trying to lose weight, are going to determine how much, how frequently, and also your age and recovery components. So let's assume that you have your dietary strategy locked in. If you're building muscle, you're probably going to need at least 3 to as many as 6 weight training workouts a week if you're trying to build muscle over and above, say, 5 or 10 pounds. First 12 weeks, you can do almost anything and be successful. 2 or 3 times a week, 30 minutes a day would be great. When you get into HIIT training, that tends to be more effective as you're younger than as you're older. As you get older, your body often can't take the impact or recovery components that HIIT intake. So usually 2 HIIT workouts per week is certainly enough to maintain muscle mass and produce a lot of results, but it's often suboptimal from a calories in, calories out in a weight loss scenario, or if you're trying to build muscle in the body. And then here's the cool part though. Once you've achieved your optimal outcome, let's say you like the way you look, you like how much muscle mass you have, you need about 20% of the exercise you were doing to get there in order to maintain it.
Good data. And then again, different strokes for different folks out there. Are you encouraging your clients or the people who read the book to train to failure? Is everybody different in terms of how hard they need to be doing that training for, if they are doing 3 to 6 times a week, depending on what their goals are?
Absolutely. The variance on that is pretty significant. We actually included there's an app that comes with it. You can scan it in, and we have a whole system of training analysis that allows you to actually pick exercise routines, weight training exercise routines. Both Matt and I were trained exercise physiologists, kinesiologists, things like that. And we built a large personal training business. We coach tens of thousands of people between the two of us. So we build out systems based on your goals and outcomes. That being said, if you have an injury, if you're in suboptimal hormone aspects, maybe you're in your late 30s, 40s, or 50s or beyond, you're probably going to want to look at, some specifics on any mechanical challenges that you might have from old injuries or suboptimal range of motion components that would, keep you from doing certain exercise components. That's where you need a professional on that side. And 2, if your hormones are suboptimal, and there's a great number of people after 40 that have suboptimal hormones, you're definitely going to want to work with a naturopathic doctor that's familiar with hormone regulation, so that you make sure that you optimize your hormones as well as your training strategy to go with your diet strategy. If you do all those three things, your success is literally guaranteed, and the confidence that you have in engaging goes up, so you're not falling prey to getting trapped in an internet loop where, oh, well, so-and-so expert said this and this other expert said the other thing, and my favorite 20-year-old athlete says you should do this. Well, yeah, a 20-year-old athlete is not a 55-year-old lady who's post-menopausal and has had 3 children. It's just, you're not dealing with the same person.
As much as we know there's water out there, there will be 13,000 different opinions on how to optimize your workout, and they're not going to agree. It's just, again, finding what works for you, because everybody's different, and it's kind of a just people do what they want, they feel that worked for them. So you mentioned that you have to have the plan after, and then we're seeing that, from everything from people who are trying to like berberine or a natural way or caloric restriction, people who are on Ozempic, Mounjaro, which is a whole nother, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole for this podcast, but it's the same thing. You need to have a plan afterwards to understand that you can't just go back to square one. You have to know what you're going to do afterwards to maintain what you already put all that work in to do, which is, you said, is sometimes the hardest part. Otherwise, everything goes back to where you were. So what are you telling people who read the book or who you train in terms of what they need to think about, the top 1 or 2 things to think about when they have stopped either a weight loss protocol or muscle building or some combo of both?
Yeah. So what we're talking about essentially is your pyramid of nutritional decisions, and I'll run through them really quickly. The foundation of the pyramid is spiritual and cultural commitments and emotional and psychological needs. So, for example, I have friends in the Hindu culture who have a high percentage of plant-based diets, even though maybe plant-based might be suboptimal for some of them. The cultural commitments, preemptively don't allow them to eat animal-based proteins. Okay, fine. So that's got to be factored in. Emotional and psychological needs. So if we take Matt and I as examples, Matt he likes to have, what he calls a refeed, on a week-to-week basis, because he feels if he's too restrictive, it's not good for him psychologically. I, on the other hand, I'm one of those guys that I prefer to be kind of like a dietary cyborg. Here's my diet. I'm eating the same thing every day. There's very little variance, and I can do that ad infinitum to achieve my goal. That's the third piece. What's your goal? If you're eating to, be an endurance runner or a weight trainer, or you're eating for cognitive performance, your dietary strategy can vary significantly. So maybe like a ketogenic diet and a 1 meal a day on a ketogenic, for cognitive optimization with lots of nootropics, that's your best goal. Then if you're putting in triathlete model, you're going to have to be, really boosting up your calories, because your energy expenditure, you're going to have to eat maybe multiple times a day, maybe have multiple training sessions a week. And then you get into the calories and macros that are going to fit within the goal. Nutrigenomics, in other words, how you turn off and on your optimal and suboptimal genetics. Your gut biome, which these all go under diet optimizers, like what bacteria cultures are right for you based on your diet. What supplements are best for you? So for example, if you have suboptimal or blood sugar regulation and you're on a relatively high carbohydrate diet, maybe you're adding something like blood sugar breakthrough to stabilize your blood sugar. And then you're looking at food allergies and sensitivities. And ultimately at the top is the lifestyle, your final key to sustainability, which is basically, what are you going to be able to do for the long term? Because at the end of the day, we kind of end up at the base of the health. We're trying to maintain the best health we can as we get older, and that's those focuses alter over time. And this way, you can seamlessly go between your outcome goals and know what things to ask, where to tweak, where not to tweak by using the book, as opposed to trying to figure it all out yourself, and then leveraging the appropriate professionals to give you the data that you require to make those decisions.
So it's kind of going to be a 3-part process. It's not 3-part, 3-people process. Them taking that book, get themselves those questions answered, and then working with the appropriate professional, be it a naturopath and a trainer, and then kind of making that nice perfect soup together to get where they want to get to.
Yeah, and they can produce radically, better results than the general public, because you've got a far improved strategy. And a lot of people who go into the diet game, they're using a half-baked strategy. that's not sustainable over their time. They're violating, core aspects of their psychological, emotional, and maybe even genetic makeup. And, they kind of grind their way to success. And then they blow up afterwards. They go back to or get worse than before, and they say, "Oh, well, it's just not for me." And that's what, as a dietary expert and someone that's been in the field my entire life, I think everyone who is a professional in the field have to take ownership for the fact that so many people are failing. So many people are gaining, if you look at the health outcomes and obesity levels and stuff, well, the reality is we haven't been sharing the proper message to the general public. So we're at blame. And our goal is, we're not throwing with this book, we're not throwing any diets under the bus. We're not throwing any genetics. We're not throwing any cultural aspects under the bus. We're saying, here's the things that you kind of twist the plot adventure. You go, okay, I'm a keto, I like ketogenic diets. I want to optimize for cognitive performance, and I've got cardiovascular risks according to my genetics. Okay, so I know those three things. What do I need to do? The book gives you the strategies or the tactics. First, the strategy, and then the tactics that are going to allow you to be successful using that. And if you want to change later on, you can. And if you want to stay the same, that's fine. You got it down, and away you go.
That's what's great about where you guys are going with this is we're finally, I think, starting to go away a little bit from the really small niche diet. Okay, you're, again, like you said, you're keto, you're carnivore, you're this, you're that, into big picture. Know your macros, know your data, know what your goals are, and then we can mix and match the rest of that stuff to get you to your goal. It doesn't have to be everybody's got to go down the same pathway, and it won't work. So I think that's kind of, luckily, I think the paradigm is finally starting to go a little bit the other way, that people aren't on these ridiculous diets that they're not sustainable, and then they go back to where they were. They're all depressed and like, well, no diet works for me, or they pull out these terms, weight loss resistance, or I'm big, whatever unfortunate cliche that they bring up now. So do you guys incorporate any type? I know you mentioned the data, like the lab data part. Is any part of the book in mentioning or discussing like wearables, like an HRV monitor or CGM, or that's kind of patients can kind of mix and choose on their own?
Oh yeah, we give a wide array of the technology and tests that you may wish to apply relative to those factors: your goals, your lifestyle, and your genetics. So for example, if you're trying to optimize for blood sugar regulation because you have a history of diabetes in the industry and obesity, well, a continuous glucose monitor would be great. And maybe looking at a genetics test to see which dietary strategy is going to be more optimal for your ability to metabolize the food that you're eating. And then you might pick some supplements that are going to assist you on that process because you got yourself down. You know that, hey, ketogenic's right for me, or paleo's right for me, or if it fits your macros, like a lot of bodybuilders follow, is better for you, and because it gives you more variety, makes things easier for you because you travel a lot. So all of those things are factored in there, and it becomes exciting because now you're not in the, throwing darts at a dartboard or falling prey to cult dynamics that occur inside of, kind of what I call diet cults, which is, if you're a ketogenic, you can only do this, and this is the only way. Well, if you take a look at a high-fat diet, there's tremendous amounts of benefits to a high-fat diet. But what you might not know is that there are certain fats that your body's going to metabolize really well, and some fats that won't, and that's going to vary quite significantly for an individual. So, as someone on a ketogenic diet, maybe you do better on saturated fats than someone else, or different types of fats are more optimal for your physiology, and you can determine that relatively quickly using the book, and that was going to make your transition into that diet or the success of that diet much easier and much faster than any other way, without saying, I can only do this, or I have to eat bacon every day like so and so on the internet does.
So it sounds like you guys have done is taken away a lot of the, like you said, the cult or like the cliches from every specific diet. And again, people can individually kind of take whichever chapter in the book or section of the book that they're looking at and make it work for them. Yeah. A lot of keto people think they have to eat bacon. A lot of carnivores think they're eating red meat every day. And again, there's all these different kind of cliches that I think are making things worse, not better in a lot of different ways. So we talked a lot about diet and getting to your goals, nutrition goals. What didn't we mention? What are the two ideas that people need to understand again, is it mindset? Is it, okay, making it through that first 2 weeks? Is it seeing the goals in the mirror? Is it understanding the rebound effect? Is it all of the above? What are those two factors that people need to understand to really get to that goal?
I think is your post goal. Number one is picking the right strategy to get to your goal, and number two is what's your strategy after your goal is reached. If I would look at even in my own life, and I'll give you where I've figured this out early on, unfortunately, when I competed at the Mr. Universe in 2003, after that contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. Why? Because I didn't understand reverse dieting. I was on a restricted calorie diet for an extended period of time. And you see this with some of the major companies out there that are advocating highly restrictive diet and offsetting hormone shots and things like that in order to sustain yourself over time. And then people's metabolism gets destroyed and they get to their goal and they lose 40, 50, 60 pounds. Or we saw what happened with the Biggest Loser contest. We kind of go into an explanation of why that happened to so many of those people who lost tremendous amounts of weight and had all this success. And then, a year or two later, they're back in worse condition than they were before. Why did that happen? Because their post-diet strategy wasn't figured out. And that, I think, is the area where people mess up the most. I learned from it. And now coming out of those things, I share with people, if your strategy to get to your goal is one thing, your strategy to get there is even more important, because otherwise, or to stay there, because you're going to default to the old paradigm and probably do more damage than if you've never dieted before.
No, I totally agree. And again, the Biggest Loser mess up, I think, is such an illustration. I mean, that's also a TV reality series, so that makes even their diet more distorted. And you have Bob Harper yelling, and whatever I can, the female's name on the show, yelling at people, and then it just unfortunately made them worse, and some of them unfortunately had heart issues and so on down. So it just, again, you need to have that post strategy, not do crash, or as you call them, the cult diet. So you made one more question regarding the diet that I always get asked, and I'm going to ask the expert here, is there a timeline when people should pay attention to the results? Like, I have patients who 2 days out are weighing themselves, or they're checking their muscle size and saying, well, this isn't doing anything for me. Is there that first step, that first check mark where, okay, a month in, 6 weeks in, where you can say, okay, now let me see where I am. Is this working or not working?
Yeah, we talk about that inside of the book. And so first off, when people are dieting, and it all depends on how much weight you have to lose and how long that you've allotted to do that, are going to determine some response. So for example, if you're, in the obese category where you're over, 30% body fat, and probably at least half the population is in that zone. Almost any diet that you do initially, you're going to see some initial results. Some of that will be just, or if you go on a ketogenic diet, for example, water loss results will give you a false indication of how much fat loss. So one of the key elements that you can incorporate is a DEXA scan, or someone who's good at fat calipers. But if you're grossly overweight, fat calipers are going to be very hard to see those benefits. So the evidence is showing a couple things. I would look at kind of hardcore scientific, like a DEXA scan, or one of those in-body scans or something like that, maybe every two weeks to 4 weeks. So if you look at month-to-month outcomes, from a scale standpoint, there's a lot of evidence that shows that daily weighing keeps people more disciplined psychologically, and expect that you're going to see anywhere from 3 to 10 pounds shift on that scale on a day-to-day basis. And that's based on hydration levels, food bulk, all of those things are going to impact that. But you want to see the trend staying or going down. That check-in every morning. Like, I get up and weigh myself every single morning. And from that, I also get data on my food. Did I get inflamed? Did I eat too much? Am I a little bit dehydrated? All that sort of stuff. And then when you correlate it with those tests like DEXA scan, which is showing subcutaneous fat, it's showing visceral fat, it's showing lean body mass, you're looking at hydration levels. Now you're getting a more accurate picture of what you're losing. And what you want to look at closely is losing the adipose tissue. That's what you want to get rid of, that fat that makes you look fat. Okay. And if you're concentrating on those things, then you just go down that process and you commit to it. And you don't look at, the other thing is psychologically, don't look at a diet as I've got to lose 10 pounds by my sister's wedding, or I got to lose 20 pounds for my high school reunion, or whatever that happens to be. That psychological strategy over time almost always fails. It can be a motivator in the interim, but without that motivation, when you hit that goal, you have better set another goal and a concordant strategy immediately, or you're going to regress backwards.
Love it. And just for people listening out there, DEXA, this is not the DEXA scan that women get to check their bone structure. Make sure when you get a DEXA scan done, you let them know you're looking to do visceral fat and muscle mass, because a lot of places don't do it, and they need to know what test you're doing. And I've just had this happen in patients like hundreds of times already. So that's what you're looking for. This is the test that will probably be part of your physical in the next couple of years, because it just gives us so much usable data. So now you're part of a great supplement company. You got the book coming out. Where are we heading in the next 2 to 3 years? What are we going to be talking about? What is the future of weight loss and building muscle and just being overall healthy? What are you excited about?
I'm so excited. And I'll tell you where I think the key elements are. Genetics, hormone optimization, neurochemical optimization, which is basically for cognitive health, biohacking devices that are correlated for your genetics. And what I mean by that is choosing the right like some people are going to do well in cryo, some people are going to do better on red light therapy, some people are going to do well on atmospheric cell training. And then what I would call the more advanced elements, which are, exosomes, stem cells, V cells, and eventually into, genetic editing. Those are where the future is going to be. I'm actually working on building an algorithm where we address all of these components, from detoxification pathways, hormonal health, cardiovascular health, body fat, all that's like, there's about 15 different dynamics that you can look at just off my head. And then on one axis, and then the other axis is what are you going to put your lifestyle, your epigenetical triggers, your dietary triggers and all that, and punch it into a computer so that it'll say, okay, over the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to focus on this thing. Once you hit that, the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to focus on this, and you focus on this and focus on this. And I think that we're going to add 20% more to the healthy lifespan in the population. So going back to the 1960s, and why do I say that? In the 1967, I'm from Canada, when they brought in Social Security, the life expectancy of a Canadian citizen was 67 years old. The medical interventions, and largely part, I would say this would be mostly within surgeries, advances, and acute care, cardiovascular risk, the accessibility of ambulance and medical services, increased life expectancy to about 80 years old. Over the last 3 or 4 years, that's actually going downwards to the fact that, the medical industry as a whole is now, depending on what data you're looking at, the 3rd or 4th leading cause of death through contraindications, complications from surgery, a variety of things. And the disability adjusted life expectancy is now down to 60 years old, according to Professor Olshansky in the New England Journal of Medicine. So what does that mean? Well, people are living to that 75, 80 years old where they weren't before, but they're living in a compromised state that lasts 15 to 20 years. What I think we're going to build on the backs of what was happening in the medical industry, and we're going to create these lifestyle components that preemptively address the issues that take people out early or disrupt the quality of their life early on. And that means we should be able to, over the course of my lifetime, be having people to live functionally in a great situation from 80 to 100 years old. And that next 20% jump. And I think it's doable. I think it's achievable. And I think you're going to see more and more of it over time. And I'm really pumped to be on that. And that's what we're doing at Bioptimizers, because I think this is where the future is. Let's live long. Let's live strong. Let's enjoy the ride while we're here.
Love it. So you could take all the companies I see at all these biohacking conventions. I can put into this program eventually and just know what I have to do and not have to do my own research, or just kind of learn.
Exactly.
That would be great. It would answer a lot of questions for a lot of people who spend a lot of money on the wrong things sometimes. So tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find the book. Show the book one more time. This book, for people who are listening, this is a book. This is not like a little paperback. This is like an encyclopedia of good knowledge here. So just check it out. The Ultimate Nutrition Bible, with Wade Lightheart and I see Matt, and definitely check it out. Coming out September 26th.
There's going to be an audio book. It also comes with a video course that you can get, which we go into all of the concepts in video and explain them out in detail, as well as an audio book and an app. So you can start adding your data, because we're going to actually create more and more information that we help people customize their own individual choices and be able to leverage the professionals that they need to make the most accurate decisions possible. We're available. You can get it at bioptimizers.com, all the big retail bookstores, and Amazon, all that sort of stuff. And we want to hear your feedback. We love doing this. We're both passionate. Matt and I fell in love with helping people lose weight and feel great as trainers years ago. We built a company on it. We have an amazing team of biologists and researchers. We're probably doing more research and biological experimentation with legitimate scientists than almost any other nutrition company you'll ever run into. And we got great customer service. If you ever try any of our products, you don't like them, we just give them your money back, because we want you to continue to redeploy your money on the way that allows you to achieve maximum happiness, maximum health, and maximum success. And it's a lot of fun. We got a lot of great friends out there, and we think this book is a game changer. It's something in there for everybody, regardless of your age, regardless of your dietary strategy or preferred method, and will allow you to avoid the big mistakes. And I've made lots of them, and I'd like to help other people avoid those mistakes as they go forward on their strategy.
Sounds incredible. It's all info that people ask me about, so I'm going to refer them all to that book, and go to biooptimizers.com for all the great supplements. They do have great customer service. I can attest to that firsthand. And thanks for coming on, Wade, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me on the podcast. And for all you listening out there, try this book. I think it's going to revolutionize how you think about your book and or about your diet for both yourself and your family members. And I think it's going to be a favorite among all of the experts in the industry.
So, I can't wait to check it out. Thanks for coming on. Have a great night.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.